My parents compelled me to toil on our family farm, wouldn't fund my education, and disowned me. What if the people who were supposed to love you most, saw you not as a child, but as free labor? And what if, years later, when the dust settled, they weren't just demanding money, but trying to sell your little sister off like property? This isn't just a story about a farm, it's about the poison of family, and how I finally broke free. Our family farm wasn't a home, it was a cage. Every breath felt heavy with unspoken rules and the scent of manure, a constant reminder of where I belonged. It was a life I never chose, a legacy that was slowly crushing me. My name is Ethan, and at 18, my full-time job was being free labor on our sprawling, 200-acre farm. They never called it a job, of course. My parents, Frank and Brenda, proudly declared it, the Gordon duty, a fancy way of saying I had no say in my own life. While other kids had hobbies and friends, I had chores that multiplied with every sunrise. People romanticize farm life, but that's only if you're a tourist for 2 days, waking up late while someone else does the grunt work. For me, it was an unpaid subscription I never signed up for. Every morning began the same, Frank barking orders, Brenda calling it character building, and me wondering why child labor laws seemed to bypass our property entirely. The farm was our family's sacred cow, passed down generations. Frank and Brenda loved to brag about protecting the legacy, but legacy, I learned, always meant more work for the youngest kid. The older generation gets credit, the middle gets authority, and people like me. We got to shovel manure and pretend it was meaningful. Then there was Leo, my older brother, the golden child, heir to the throne. He could screw up royally and still be praised for trying. Once, he left a gate unlatched, sending half our livestock into the road. Frank called it a learning experience. I, however, once forgot to coil a hose and was apparently guilty of treason. Leo got the interesting tasks, I got whatever was repetitive, miserable, or both. I knew deep down I didn't want to end up buried in the same fields as my great-grandfather. So, I secretly started saving money, working for our neighbor, my escape fund, my retirement plan at 17. But in my family, anything you earned became community property, if the community decided it wanted it, and they definitely decided. My little sister, Chloe, was 14, and she learned early that staying quiet was her safest bet. She wasn't loud or defiant, she just watched, took mental notes, and kept her head down. She understood our family dynamic better than anyone, even me sometimes. Kids notice patterns, even if adults deny them. Most days on the farm felt like an endless loop, dark mornings, chores, school exhausted, more chores, eat, sleep, repeat. If you dared to break the cycle, say, by having an opinion, the house reacted like you'd pulled the plug on life support. The farm came first. Feelings came last, usually not at all. And the thing is, you live like that for years before realizing how messed up it really is. When you're raised in a system, you think it's normal. You don't question why adults treat a field like it's sacred, but ignore their kids burning out. You just keep your head down until eventually, something snaps. Looking back, the unspoken rule was simple, if something breaks, it's the kid's fault. If the kid breaks, well, try working harder. That was my world, and though I didn't know it yet, everything was already shifting. The more I wanted out, the tighter the farm tried to pull me back in. I figured out pretty early that I liked computers more than cows, which, in my house, was practically an act of rebellion. It started when our school replaced its ancient, wheezing machines with actual working ones. Most kids played games, I clicked on anything that looked like a setting I wasn't supposed to touch. One afternoon, my computer teacher leaned over my shoulder and asked, "How'd you figure that out already?" I just shrugged, clicked the button that didn't look friendly. She laughed, "You should think about the advanced computer and math track next year, Ethan. You do great." It was the first time an adult looked at something I did and saw potential, not just manpower. I brought the news home, expecting celebration. Frank didn't even look up from sorting bills, a constant, stressful sight in our house. When does it meet? He grunted. In the fall, I said. He dropped the envelope. Brenda added, that's harvest season, honey. We'll need you here. Maybe another year. Just like that. Achievement unlocked, then instantly deleted. Apparently, crops would die if I wasn't personally standing next to them. A week later, the school counselor called them in. I wasn't allowed inside the meeting, but afterward, she found me in the hall. Ethan, this track could help with college admissions. Pulling you out isn't in your best interest. Frank brushed past her, tossing out, college isn't the plan anyway, like he was announcing the weather. The counselor blinked. Sir, with respect, Frank cut her off, no need for a lecture. We know what we're doing. I didn't argue. I knew better. Logic didn't live in our house. The farm did. Anything else was a distraction, a weakness, or both. After that, I started keeping my interests to myself. Honesty wasn't a valued crop on our property. If you liked something, it became a liability. If you wanted something, it became selfish. If you were good at something not farm-related, it was irrelevant. So, I worked on computers in secret. I stayed after school, claiming I needed math help, which was technically true if learning new coding concepts counted. The computer lab became the only place where no one expected me to lift anything heavier than a keyboard. Around this time, my uncle, Arthur, started showing up more in family conversations, not physically, just as a topic. He was Frank's younger brother, the one who betrayed the family, which, in our family, meant he got a life. To hear Frank tell it, Arthur had committed some unforgivable sin, abandonment, disrespect, selfishness, whatever label wasn't currently being slapped on me. Brenda would shake her head, he thinks he's better than us. Frank would add, city life messes with people's heads. I didn't say out loud that Arthur's head seemed perfectly fine, considering he had an actual salary, working heat, and a spine. The more I learned about computers, the more farming felt like a trap door someone closed before I knew what was happening. I wasn't planning an escape yet, but I was realizing I needed one. One evening, Frank told me to skip a school event because the barn roof needed patching. I made the mistake of asking, couldn't Leo do it? Frank stared at me. Leo has work early. Don't start. Translation, Leo's time is valuable. Mine is infinitely refillable. I patched the roof while Leo sat inside, polishing the new truck Frank had bought him for farm work, which mostly meant joyriding. I remembered scraping shingles and thinking how ridiculous it was that every time I got a chance to do something meaningful, computer class, school events, anything, Frank shut it down like it was a threat. By 16, I knew the family rule book by heart: speak less, work more, want nothing, lose nothing, ask for nothing, disappoint no one. People say parents want the best for their kids. In my house, they wanted the same for their kids, the same life, the same path, the same future, preferably one that didn't involve thinking too far ahead. Consistency was the real family value. Everything else was rebellion. Arthur was the first adult who ever talked to me like my future existed. He'd call every couple of weeks, usually after work, asking about the computer lab. Nothing dramatic, just simple stuff like, still messing with Python, or, figure out that sorting thing yet? Compared to the usual questions at home, did you feed the calves? Why is the south fence leaning? Did you wash the truck? It felt like a different language. I'd joke, you know, Arthur, being treated like a human is weird. Not sure I'm used to it. He'd laugh, that's the bare minimum, kid. Funny how the bare minimum can feel like generosity when you grow up without it. One weekend, he showed up unannounced. Frank wasn't thrilled, but he couldn't forbid it since Arthur was still family. Arthur pulled me aside and handed me a laptop case. Nothing fancy, just a used machine he'd refurbished himself. Thought you could use your own, he said. Might make learning easier. I whispered, this feels like you're smuggling contraband. He grinned. Yeah. Don't tell your dad it has a keyboard. I wasn't even halfway through turning it on when Frank walked in. His eyes locked onto the laptop like it was a wild animal loose in the kitchen. "What's that?" he demanded. "It's a laptop," Arthur said. "For Ethan." Frank's jaw clenched. "He doesn't need that." Arthur kept his tone even. "It's for school." Frank snapped back, "School doesn't require whatever that is." Brenda hovered behind him, arms crossed, watching like she wasn't sure whether to scold or pray. Arthur handed me the charger anyway. "Use it for your classes." "Okay." Frank didn't yell, but his voice went flat. "The dangerous kind of quiet. We'll discuss how and when you use it." And that was that. Laptop smuggled in, then immediately thrown into lockdown. I was allowed to use it for approved school tasks, which apparently meant whenever no one important needed me for something else. But even with supervision, it still felt like freedom. You take what you can get in a house like ours. A few months later came the infamous truck incident, which basically confirmed everything I already knew about fairness in our family. Frank bought Leo a brand new truck for farm work. Even though Leo's contribution to the farm mostly consisted of standing near machinery while I actually ran it, I remember watching Frank hand over the keys like it was some sacred passing of the torch. Leo grinned like he'd earned it through grit and hard work, not just by being the oldest son with the right personality. Leo totaled the truck 2 weekends later. Word spread fast because around here, everyone has binoculars but no boundaries. Leo had driven it into a ditch after drinking at a friend's place. The truck was wrecked, the fence ruined, and the neighbor whose property he'd torn through was angry enough to consider pressing charges. I expected chaos, yelling, accountability, something. Instead, the town treated it like a tragic accident that had befallen poor Leo, the hard-working farm boy who must have been exhausted. People gave him sad smiles and told Frank, "Kids make mistakes." Nobody used the words reckless or drunk. That kind of honesty, apparently, is reserved for younger sons who don't want to farm. The only real consequence was financial. Repairs, fees, fence damages, none of it was cheap. One morning, Brenda knocked on my door, holding the small metal lockbox where I kept the money I'd earned working for our neighbor. "We need this for the truck situation," she said. I stared at it. "That's my school money." "It's for the family," she said, her voice sharp. "Don't be a brat." Apparently, my money volunteered. Good to know savings have free will. I didn't fight them. Fighting never changed anything, it just added more chores. They emptied the box and walked out like they hadn't just stolen from their own kid. The farm needed saving, and apparently, I was the only one available to sacrifice anything. Leo, meanwhile, kept both his freedom and the sympathy tour. Arthur found out later when he noticed I wasn't buying any of the study materials he recommended. He didn't say anything at first, probably waiting for me to tell him. When I finally admitted what happened, he sighed. "You know that wasn't right," he said. "Fairness wasn't a policy here. Hell, it wasn't even a suggestion. At best, it was a rumor that never made its way to our side of the county." The day the acceptance letter came, I opened it in the barn, the only place where nobody hovered. I read the first line, "We are pleased to inform you." And for a second, I actually felt something close to pride, the real kind, the kind I'd only ever seen other kids get. Then I remembered, excitement doesn't survive long in certain rooms. I walked into the kitchen, holding the letter like it might burn through my hand if I hesitated. Frank was at the table, sharpening a pocketknife for no reason other than dramatic effect. Brenda was rinsing vegetables like she expected applause. "I got into the computer science program," I said. Silence. The kind that doesn't mean shock, it means calculation. Frank finally spoke. "And what am I supposed to do with that information?" I blinked. "I thought you'd want to know. It's a good school." Brenda set a bowl down. "Ethan, you don't even like being away from home that long." Interesting news to me. Frank leaned back. We raised you better than to run off chasing nonsense. There it was. My future magically transformed into their embarrassment. Accepting the letter apparently meant abandoning the farm, the family, the ancestors, the crops, the fence posts. Basically, every non-human entity my parents prioritized. I tried to be rational. I can learn things that help the farm. There's tech that makes, Frank cut me off. Real farmers use their hands, not whatever screens you're obsessed with. Right. Because touching dirt automatically makes you wise. The argument escalated fast. Eventually, Frank stood up, pointed at the door, and said, "If you leave for that school, don't come back." Brenda added, "Think very carefully. This family depends on you." It was presented like a choice, but it felt more like a test with one answer they'd already circled in red pen. I remember thinking, interesting technique. Shame I'm not enrolled in obedience school instead of college. I left 2 days later. Arthur pulled into the driveway mid-morning. I carried out my duffel bag, and Frank stepped onto the porch like he'd been waiting to intercept me. "You walk off this property now," he said, his voice hard. "You're choosing strangers over blood." "I'm choosing a future you don't want me to have," I answered. "That future is pointless," he snapped. "You're meant to work this land." Brenda appeared behind him. "We just want what's best for you." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "No, you want what's best for the farm." Frank's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone." "I've been watching it my whole life," I said. Didn't make a difference. Leo came out onto the porch, arms crossed, like he was supervising. "You're really leaving?" he asked, surprised. "Yeah," I said. "College tends to work better when you're near it." Frank jabbed a finger toward Arthur. "He put this in your head. Manipulated you." Arthur stayed calm. "He's 18. He made the decision." "Stay out of it," Frank snapped. "You shoved me out years ago," Arthur said, his voice even. "Might as well stay consistent." Frank turned back to me. "Once you get in that car, you're not my son." "You made that call before I did," I said. I picked up my bag and started walking toward Arthur's car. And that's when the screen door slammed open behind us. "Chloe, no!" Brenda shouted. Too late. Chloe sprinted across the porch barefoot, almost slipping on the last step. She ran straight into me and grabbed me around the middle with both arms like she was holding a lifeline. "Ethan, don't go," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please." I closed my eyes for a second. This was the part one wasn't ready for. "I have to," I said softly. "You know I do." She shook her head against my shirt. "It won't be the same." "I know," I said. "But I'm not disappearing. I'll find a way to talk to you." Frank barked, "Chloe, get back here now." She didn't move. I tightened my arms around her for a few seconds, then gently pulled back. "Go inside before he loses it," I said. "I'll see you again. I promise." Her eyes were red, but she nodded and stepped back. Brenda grabbed her by the shoulders and steered her toward the door like she was moving livestock. Chloe looked over her shoulder once, her small face streaked with tears, and then she was gone inside the house. I got in Arthur's car before I changed my mind. I thought moving out meant the drama would calm down. It didn't. Within a week, I started getting texts from cousins, aunts, a couple of uncles I barely knew. All variations of the same message: "How could you do this to your parents? They're heartbroken. You should come home and apologize." One cousin added, "Your dad said you ran away." Ran away. I left with a suitcase, a plan, and a ride. Not exactly the plot of a missing person report. It didn't take long to realize Frank had rewritten the story. In his version, I wasn't accepted into college and choosing my future. I was manipulated by Arthur, confused, ungrateful, brainwashed by city ideas, and apparently too emotional to think for myself. I didn't know whether to laugh or send out a correction email. The narrative was impressive, in a deranged kind of way. Frank had crafted a whole alternate reality where he was the victim, and I was the runaway delinquent. It explained why relatives who never visited suddenly cared deeply about family unity. One aunt wrote, "Your father is devastated. He said you stormed off." Stormed off. I packed quietly while Brenda hovered behind me, whispering prayers like I was terminal. If I stormed, I must have done it silently and with efficient folding. Meanwhile, Chloe went radio silent. She wasn't allowed a phone until a certain age, so most of our communication was through short emails or messages sent from school computers. Except now, nothing came through. Every message I sent sat unopened. Every question went unanswered. I asked Arthur, "You think she's okay?" "She's probably not allowed to talk to you," he said, his expression grim. "Your dad sees control as strategy." The weirdest part was how family members reacted like I'd committed a crime. Leaving home at 18 for college is normal everywhere else. But in my family, leaving the farm was treated like desertion. Once Frank told everyone I'd been led astray, the hostility made more sense. Nothing spreads faster in rural communities than a false narrative with emotional seasoning. Arthur tried to help. He repeated the same line whenever I looked worn down, "Let them talk. You're not responsible for their story." Easier said than done, but he wasn't wrong. After a few weeks, I stopped explaining myself. If people wanted the story Frank wrote, they could keep it. I didn't owe anyone a rebuttal. For a while, life with Arthur felt almost steady. Not perfect, not simple, just steady. Then he started having stomach pain that wouldn't go away. At first, he brushed it off, saying it was bad takeout or stress. But stress doesn't make someone lose weight that fast or make them wince when they think you're not looking. When the doctor said stage 4 pancreatic cancer, everything in the room seemed to shrink. It was the kind of news that doesn't need embellishment. You hear it once, and it hangs between you like a heavy curtain. Arthur nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting something bad, but hoping for something slightly less catastrophic. I just stared at the floor, trying to keep my brain from overheating. I wasn't sad yet. It was too fast for sadness, more like shock trying on different outfits. That night at the apartment, Arthur said, "You might want to delay starting your first semester." "I'm not leaving you alone," I said, a fierce protectiveness bubbling up. He didn't argue, which scared me more than anything. Caregiving started gradually, then all at once. I went from college prep to tracking medication schedules, timing meals, and figuring out which foods wouldn't upset his stomach. "Congratulations," I told him one morning while sorting pill bottles. "You've promoted me to part-time nurse." "Zero experience, but I promise enthusiasm," he smirked. "As long as you don't accidentally poison me." "No promises," I said. "Your labels are tiny." We both pretended that joking made cancer less loud. Hospice nurses came by to teach me the basics: what signs to watch for, when to call, how to help him move without hurting him. I took notes like a student in a class I never signed up for. It was necessary. As his energy declined, he spent more time talking about things he needed to prepare. Not emotional goodbyes, but legal ones. "We need to get my will updated," he said one afternoon, sorting through old paperwork. "You don't have to rush that." He looked at me like I'd missed something obvious. "Ethan, you know who your parents are." "Fair point." He met with his lawyer twice. I sat in the living room while they talked behind closed doors. When he came out, he looked tired but relieved. "I'm making arrangements," he said. "The apartment, savings, investments, all going to you." I shook my head. "Arthur, too much." "No," he said firmly. "It's barely enough. You're starting your life. And I know exactly what would happen if your father thought even $5 were up for grabs. He said it calmly, but the implication was sharp. He wasn't being dramatic. He was being accurate. A few days later, I got a message from Leo. That alone was suspicious. He hadn't messaged me since I left. "Hey, how's Uncle Arthur doing?" The question was fine, but I could already feel a calculator behind it. "He's sick," I replied. "It's serious." Leo responded fast. "Serious like long-term, or serious like expensive?" There it was. Not even subtle. "He has cancer," I wrote. "He's dying." A 5-minute pause. Then, "Damn. You doing okay? Is he leaving anything for you? I mean, it would make sense since you're taking care of him." Concern with a price tag. Classic Leo. I stared at the screen for a moment before replying, "We're not talking about money right now." But he kept going, just asking. "Dad said Arthur's got a good amount saved." I put my phone face down and left it there. Every time I thought maybe Leo was just oblivious, he'd remind me that everything in his world was measured by dollar signs and convenience. His version of sympathy always came with a ledger. A week later, Frank and Brenda finally decided to visit. They hadn't called. They hadn't sent a message. They just showed up, knocking like they were doing a wellness check. When I opened the door, Frank looked past me like I was a misplaced suitcase. "We're here to see Arthur," he said. Brenda added, "We thought it was time." Time for what? Time to pretend they cared? Time to look for financial crumbs? I let them in because Arthur wouldn't want a scene. They walked into the living room where he was resting on the couch. Frank's first question wasn't, "How are you holding up?" or, "Do you need anything?" It was, "Do you have all your paperwork in order?" Brenda followed with, "We just want to make sure everything's handled responsibly." Arthur gave me a look that said, "I told you so." I sat on the arm of the chair, watching them circle him like clipboard inspectors. They asked more questions about documents than about his pain levels. They wanted to know about the apartment lease, the medical bills, the bank accounts. At one point, Brenda said, "We can help manage things if needed." Arthur's voice was quiet but steady. "I've already arranged everything." Frank frowned like he'd smelled something sour. "Arranged how?" "That's not your concern," Arthur said, not looking up. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. It was the closest thing to revenge Arthur would ever bother with. They stayed less than 20 minutes. When they left, Frank said, "Let us know if there are any changes." Changes meaning opportunities. Subtle as ever. The second the door shut, Arthur exhaled. "They didn't ask how I'm feeling." "No," I said, "but they did ask about everything else." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry you have to deal with that." "It's fine," I said. Sarcasm is cheaper than therapy. He laughed weakly. "Keep doing whatever keeps you sane." I nodded. "Plan on it." Caring for Arthur didn't make me angry. Frank and Brenda did. Leo did. Every time they spoke, every question they asked, every message they sent, it all came with strings attached. They were worried his money wouldn't die with him. Arthur passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning. No dramatic last words, no movie moment, just a slow exhale and stillness. I held his hand because it felt wrong not to, after everything he did for me. Sitting beside him at the end was the least I could give back. The funeral was scheduled 3 days later. I arrived early, mostly to avoid the flood of relatives with opinions I didn't ask for. The funeral home was small, worn around the edges, and smelled faintly like old books. It suited Arthur better than anything polished ever would have. People trickled in slowly. His co-workers first, then a few neighbors. The ones who actually mattered came early to mourn. The ones who didn't came early to manage assets. I spotted my parents' car long before they stepped out. Frank parked like the space owed him respect. Brenda followed behind him with her chin lifted, as if grief had a dress code and she was the only one who got the memo. Before I could brace myself, something small and fast collided with me. Ethan. It was Chloe. Hair messy, tears already running down her cheeks. She wrapped her arms around me with a force that nearly winded me. They couldn't skip the funeral without looking heartless, so they brought Chloe along and hovered like security. "I missed you," she whispered. I held her tight. "Missed you, too." It was the first time I'd seen her, heard her voice, or touched her since the day I left. She didn't care who was watching. She didn't care that Frank was glaring from 10 feet away like affection was contraband. She just kept hugging me like the world might crack if she let go. Brenda finally called out, "Chloe, give him some space." Chloe didn't move until I gently loosened my grip. "I'm not disappearing," I said quietly. "I told you I'd see you again." She nodded, wiping her eyes. Frank snapped his fingers, literally snapped, and she walked back toward them like someone returning to a cage they'd learned not to rattle. Fun start to the day. Inside the viewing room, the tension wasn't subtle. You could have cut the air with the programs they handed out at the door. Arthur's picture sat framed on a table, him smiling awkwardly, clearly forced into taking the photo. He would have hated all the fuss. Relatives I barely recognized came up with sympathetic lines that sounded practiced. "So sorry for your loss, Ethan. He was such a good man. You were good to him." Then Frank approached, and the sympathy evaporated. "We need to discuss arrangements," he said by way of greeting. "Arrangements for what?" I asked. "The estate," he replied. I glanced at the casket. "He's not even buried yet." Frank lowered his voice. "These things matter. We can't wait around." Brenda added, "We're only trying to help make sure things are handled properly." Translation: we want to see what we can grab before it's locked down. I didn't argue. There was no point. Letting them talk was easier than acting like they cared. During the service, they whispered constantly, to each other, to their lawyer, to relatives. While a co-worker of Arthur's shared a heartfelt story about how Arthur mentored new hires, Frank was flipping through documents like he was reviewing blueprints. At one point, I heard him mutter, "This can't be right." Brenda whispered back, "He wasn't thinking clearly at the end." I didn't turn around. I didn't correct her. I let the implication hang like a foul smell. Nothing I said would matter to people who thought grief was a financial inconvenience. When the service ended, everyone moved to the reception area. People gathered around the food table, sharing stories about Arthur. Meanwhile, Frank cornered me near the coffee urn. "The apartment goes back to the family," he said. "It's what Arthur would have wanted." "No," I said calmly. "It's what you want." He ignored that entirely. "And the savings, those should be split. Fair is fair. When have you ever cared about fair?" Before he could answer, Arthur's lawyer approached with his briefcase. "Everyone involved in the will should come inside," he said. Frank smirked. "Good. Let's get this sorted." "Sorted? Sure." We all went into a small conference room. The lawyer opened his folder and pulled out a flash drive. Arthur left a recorded statement to accompany the written will. Frank shifted. "That won't hold if he wasn't competent." The lawyer pressed play. Arthur's voice filled the room. Clear, steady, unmistakably competent. "This is my decision. I am of sound mind. I'm leaving everything to Ethan because he's the only one who stood by me. I don't trust anyone else in the family to handle my estate responsibly." He even listed reasons, specific examples, things he'd never say out loud to them, but made sure to memorialize permanently. When the recording ended, the lawyer looked up. "Any questions?" Frank's mouth opened, then closed. Brenda's face twitched like she'd tasted something bitter. Ethan owed them 0. Arthur had planned better in dying than they ever did in living. Back at the apartment afterward, people flowed in and out, offering condolences. I went to check on the guest room, mostly to breathe for a second. When I walked into Arthur's office, I stopped cold. Brenda was inside, on her knees, rifling through drawers. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. She snapped upright, clutching papers. "I'm looking for family photos in the tax drawer." She straightened her cardigan, trying to regain composure. "I have a right to know what's being hidden." I pointed at the door. "Get out." She hesitated, then brushed past me with a muttered, "Ungrateful." Grief, apparently, involves filing cabinets. Who knew? After they finally left the apartment, the place felt noticeably quieter, like someone shut off a machine that had been rattling for hours. Peace arrived faster than they reached their car in the parking lot. That was the moment I decided something permanently. I was done. I cut contact that night. And in the sudden quiet, I realized the truth: losing people who never acted like family doesn't feel like loss. It feels like breathing. Starting college didn't come with cinematic music or a life-changing sunrise. I went to classes, turned in assignments, kept my head down, and tried to rebuild something resembling stability. Between coursework and handling the last pieces of Arthur's estate, my days felt full but manageable. Grief didn't hit in waves. It just sat quietly in the background like a roommate who didn't pay rent. My parents didn't contact me. Leo didn't either. Silence wasn't surprising. It was probably the first productive thing they'd ever done. Then one night, close to midnight, someone banged on my apartment door hard enough to make the frame shake. "Ethan, please open." It was Chloe. I yanked the door open, and she practically fell into me. She was crying, trembling, holding a backpack like it was her only possession. Her sleeves shifted, revealing bruises, fresh ones, fading ones, clear fingerprints. "What happened?" I asked, my blood running cold. She couldn't speak. She lifted the backpack, unzipped it, and shoved papers into my hands. Inside were printed emails, handwritten notes, and a drafted marriage agreement. Their signatures, the neighbor's signature, the same guy whose fence Leo tore through when he totaled the truck. Dates, financial arrangements, everything. "They're marrying me off," she choked. "Dad said it fixes everything." I held the contract, stunned. "He signed this?" She nodded. "Leo knew. He drove me there last week. He said I should just do what Dad says." Leo. The silent golden child turned accomplice. My jaw clenched. "Did Dad do this?" I asked, motioning to the bruises. "He grabbed me. I tried to run. Mom said I was embarrassing them. I didn't tell her it was worse than embarrassing. It was illegal. She didn't need legal definitions. She just needed safety." "You're staying here," I said, my voice firm, "right now." I called CPS first, then Arthur's lawyer. When the CPS investigator arrived, Chloe sat wrapped in a blanket, answering questions in a small, careful voice. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't exaggerating. She just told the truth, which was more than enough. The investigator photographed her bruises, collected the documents, and asked, "Has this happened before?" Chloe hesitated. "Dad gets angry a lot. He grabs hard. Mom says it's discipline." The investigator's jaw tightened. "You will not be going back there." Within a couple of days, Chloe was officially removed from Frank and Brenda's custody under emergency protective action. CPS asked if I'd take temporary placement. "Yes," I said immediately, without a second thought. The investigator nodded. "We'll schedule a court hearing this week." Over the next couple of weeks, everything exploded. The emails, the contract, the bruises, the financial records, it all went straight to the district attorney. Arthur's lawyer forwarded additional evidence about my parents' attempts to interfere with Arthur's estate and the financial abuse of both their children. The DA's office moved fast. Criminal charges were filed against Frank and Brenda: child endangerment, physical abuse, attempted forced marriage, coercive control, financial exploitation of a minor. Leo wasn't spared. His involvement in driving Chloe to meetings and pressuring her to go along with it got him included on the misconduct report. He wasn't charged at the same level as the parents, but he became legally restricted from contacting her. By the end of the week after the charges were filed, CPS secured temporary protective orders for both me and Chloe. Frank, Brenda, and Leo were barred from contacting us or coming anywhere near where we lived. Violating those orders meant immediate arrest. It was the first time the law felt like something standing with us instead of against us. Frank didn't take the news well. He left a voicemail for me, starting with yelling, ending with self-pitying martyrdom. "You had no right to interfere. You're tearing this family apart. You think you can steal my daughter? You'll regret this. We're taking you to court." Brenda left her own message, voice shaky. "We didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. Your father is stressed. Please, just bring her home. We can talk." Talk, right? Forced marriage definitely sounds like an issue solvable by talk. Leo texted once, "Bro, you're making this worse. You need to stop before Dad loses it." I blocked him. The court hearing came fast. Chloe sat beside me, hands twisting nervously but determined. Frank and Brenda arrived with a lawyer who looked like he regretted being hired the second he read the case file. Leo came too, expression empty, avoiding eye contact. Their attorney tried everything, claiming cultural misunderstanding, misinterpreted intentions, parental rights, stress, financial hardship, discipline, temporary poor judgment. The DA shut it down one piece at a time. When the judge asked Chloe to speak, she didn't cry. She didn't shake. She said in a steady voice, "I was scared to go home. I don't feel safe with them." That was all it took. Ethan Gordon is granted full guardianship, the judge ruled, effective immediately. Frank looked like the verdict personally insulted him. Brenda burst into tears. Leo stared at the floor like a coward who'd finally run out of excuses. About a week later, Chloe and I heard the foreclosure on the farm had finally gone through. The bank had taken the land, the equipment, the house, everything. Years of pretending the farm was untouchable had eventually caught up with them. That evening, someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole. Frank and Brenda, standing in the hallway. I didn't open the door. The protective order made that easy. "Please," Brenda said through the door. "We have nothing left." Frank added. "Ethan, you owe us this." I almost laughed. "I don't owe you anything. You're destroying us." Frank snarled. "No," I said, my voice steady, "you did that yourself." They stood there a minute longer, then left when I didn't respond again. That was the last time I saw either of them. Life with Chloe settled into something quieter, something healthier. She started therapy. She made friends at school. She asked questions, not out of fear, but curiosity. She talked about wanting to become a vet someday, working with animals because she wanted to, not because someone demanded it. One night, she looked up from her homework and asked, "Do you think we'll be okay?" "Yeah," I said, a genuine smile finally reaching my eyes. "We will." And for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the past. I was building something better. This whole journey taught me that family isn't just a word, it's an action. It's about protecting, valuing, and empowering each other, not exploiting. If you've ever had to sever ties with toxic family to find your own peace, or if you've been a lifeline for someone who desperately needed it, I want to hear your story. Do you think I overreacted, or was I completely justified? Let me know in the comments below, I'm reading everything. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow and bring you more powerful stories like this.